At 2 a.m. Beijing time on April 8, Stephen Miran, chairman of the U.S. Council of Economic Advisors, CEA, held a low-profile livestream on the YouTube channel of a well-known conservative think tank in the U.S. The Council of Economic Advisors, CEA, sounds like a powerful institution, but in reality, it's typically comprised of only 3 people: 1 chair and 2 staff members. Small as it is, the CEA operates under the Executive Office of the President and is tasked with providing objective economic advice on both domestic and international policy. It's essentially the President's mini-economic think tank. Economic heavyweights like Alan Greenspan, Nobel laureate Joseph Stiglitz, Janet Yellen, and Ben Bernanke have all previously served as CEA chairs. The role is often seen as a stepping stone to the Federal Reserve chair. Stephen Miran, the current chair, comes with formidable influence, perhaps even more so than his high-profile predecessors. After Trump shook the financial markets on April 2 with his explosive tariff proposals, Miran's previously overlooked November 2023 report titled, A User's Guide to Restructuring the Global Trading System suddenly became a hot commodity. Once dismissed as outlandish or radical, the report now appears to be a draft blueprint for Trump's second-term economic agenda. Like many investors, I too dismissed this quirky document when it first surfaced months ago. We all forgot one thing. The man sitting on the American throne is a historic-level wildcard. Unyielding in will, unpredictable in action. Why is this user's guide now seen as so forward-looking? 3 key details reveal why. 1. Miran explicitly argues in the report that the president can bypass Congress by invoking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA, thereby enhancing tariffs under the guise of national security. 2. He suggests that the ideal average U.S. tariff rate is around 20%, which he claims can maximize revenue without harming domestic consumer welfare or production stability. 3. Miran proposes a tiered tariff system based on the strategic attributes of the source country. Strategic rivals like China could face tariffs of 60% to 100%. Neutral or swing nations would face 5% to 15%, and strategic allies would receive exemptions or minimal rates. Trump's actual proposal closely mirrors this vision, with the exception that Miran's approach was gradual, while Trump opted for an all-at-once shock approach. Many stunned investors are now kicking themselves. The playbook was out in the open, and we still walked into it. At the time Miran wrote this report, he was working at a hedge fund. In December, Trump tapped him to become CEA chair, officially inducting him into his core economic advisory circle. Interestingly, Miran studied under Martin Feldstein, a renowned supply-side economist and former CEA chair under Reagan. The mentor and disciple share a consistent philosophy: focus on the supply side to resolve economic bottlenecks. In a February 2024 paper on U.S. reindustrialization, Miran outlined his central thesis: reduce the cost of domestic production through tax cuts, lower labor compliance costs, and local tax incentives, while boosting demand via national defense priorities. His economic philosophy is essentially a geopolitically charged version of supply-side economics. 2 supply-side economists, each serving a strongman president in their era. History does have a sense of irony. But the big question remains: can America truly be made great again? After assuming office, Miran toned down his usually sharp commentary on X, formerly Twitter. But his past statements explain why Trump chose him. He's a custom-fit strategist. Calm, methodical, ideologically firm, and unafraid of dismantling the old order. He has long been shunned by mainstream economists. He dismisses the Biden administration's fiscal and monetary policies and the Federal Reserve's liquidity injections. A brilliant yet staunch nationalist, he rejects globalization outright and has been a vocal cheerleader for Trump's agenda. Now welcomed into Trump's inner circle, Miran is clearly grateful and fully committed. In his grand blueprint, tariffs are merely the opening wedge. The ultimate aim is a new global system that ensures both manufacturing reshoring and the continuity of U.S. dollar dominance. In this livestream, Miran said a user's guide to restructuring the global trading system is merely a menu of ideas for the president to consider. Trump will make the final decisions. Great advisors know. There is only one main character: the boss. The art lies in making him feel every decision was his, while still moving him along a preset path. Though Miran calls it a recipe, he has already defined the cooking time, the flavor, and even the dinner guests. His guide outlines a proposed Mar-a-Lago Accord, a framework for a new U.S.-led international economic order. Miran envisions a clear three-step strategy. Each step serves both foreign policy and domestic restructuring objectives, forming a tightly integrated sequence. Step 1. Use tariffs to create an initial shock. Non-strategic allies would face a baseline tariff of 20%, while strategic rivals, read China, would see rates of 60% or higher. This isn't just old-school protectionism. It's designed to create bargaining leverage, reduce the trade deficit, and use tariff revenue to ease fiscal stress. In this context, tariffs are a multipurpose lever. Step 2. Establish institutional alliance circles. Build the Mar-a-Lago bloc. Under tariff pressure, allied nations would yield and join a U.S.-led economic security zone with aligned policies in trade, finance, and defense. Allies would receive U.S. public goods, low tariffs, Fed liquidity support, and military protection. In exchange, they'd be expected to buy more American goods, help suppress the dollar's value, convert their U.S. Treasury holdings into zero-coupon 100-year bonds, and adopt U.S. positions on China containment, plus purchase U.S. weapons. The goal? A modern-day Plaza Accord 2.0. Achieve controlled dollar depreciation while preserving its reserve currency status, restore U.S. industrial competitiveness, and let allies foot the bill. A triple win for the U.S. manufacturing returns, dollar dominance survives via blocks, and debt relief, at the allies' expense. Step 3. Systematic containment of strategic rivals. Tariffs and financial policies become twin weapons against those who refuse to join or are deemed adversaries. This could involve continuous high tariffs or even charging extra fees on their U.S. debt holdings. The aim? Reduce their ability to use the dollar effectively, hamper global asset allocation, and limit risk hedging. In doing so, the U.S. would repatriate critical supply chains and shrink rivals' competitive space. In summary: 1. Use tariffs as the hammer to create bargaining space. 2. Redraw alliances via the Mar-a-Lago Accord. 3. Launch pinpoint economic strikes to contain adversaries. Each step appears precisely calculated, tightly linked, and ambitious. Manufacturing returns, trade deficits shrink, and dollar hegemony is preserved. But the question is, even if running a country is like cooking a delicate dish, can this recipe really work? Putting an elephant into a fridge takes 3 steps. Open the fridge, put in the elephant, and close the fridge. Miran's plan seems similarly straightforward. 3 steps to revive U.S. manufacturing, secure dollar dominance, and solve the debt crisis, while containing adversaries. But here's the problem. This is a fantasy experiment trying to use linear, step-by-step logic to control a highly complex world. Each of his 3 steps requires more than U.S. declarations. Allies must comply, and markets must buy in. While the plan looks coherent, it's full of blind spots. It underestimates real-world friction, negotiations, and chain reactions. The world isn't a turn-based game like civilization. In complex systems, excessively detailed assumptions are inherently fragile. Let's dissect Miran's political fantasy through its 2 core assumptions: economic logic and market response. Miran's wildest idea is that under specific economic and monetary conditions, a 20% tariff hike will only have a mild impact on the U.S. economy and inflation. His theoretical base: tariffs cause currency depreciation in the targeted country, offsetting price increases. He cites the 2018 to 2019 U.S. China trade war. Tariffs on China rose by 17.9 percentage points. During the same period, the yuan fell 13.7% against the dollar. Import prices rose only 4.1%, and U.S. CPI barely moved. His conclusion: tariff shocks can be offset by currency depreciation in the target country. In other words, Americans won't feel the pinch as long as the other country's currency weakens. But this logic only worked in a very specific, historically cooperative environment. In 2018, inflation was low, the Fed had just exited zero interest rates, and the price system was flexible. None of which hold true in 2025. The yuan depreciation happened in a climate of strong trust in U.S. Treasuries and a high dollar index. Again, conditions that no longer exist. The trade war was limited to China, with minimal global spillover. Miran is taking a narrow, time-bound phenomenon and projecting it onto a global system-level policy. Worse, once you announce plans for massive average tariffs and say currency will absorb the shock, the market won't hedge for you. It'll flee and reprice you instead. Just look at what happened last week. On April 2nd, Trump's tariff bombshell caused immediate global market sell-offs, and even the dollar index swung wildly. It was like the audience leaving before the play even started. Why? Markets fear bad news. But they fear uncertainty even more. Miran's 3 steps are theatrical. Tariff shocks, alliance reshuffling, adversary suppression. But for financial markets, each step risks triggering chain reactions in credit, currency, and asset valuation. Higher tariffs mean higher inflation, and thus higher interest rates, which pressure asset prices. Hoping the dollar can weaken through coordinated forex intervention, after strengthening due to tariffs is pure fantasy. Allies will reevaluate the dollar's credibility. The reason why U.S. dollar assets have long been favored in the global financial system lies at its core in a strong rule of law, high monetary stability, and clear property rights protections. By treating tariffs as leverage, and the currency as a bargaining chip, Miran's grand plan has in fact shaken the very foundation of the dollar-based order, underestimating the market's deep fear of rule changes. Ultimately, Miran's entire plan is built upon a series of delicate but fragile assumptions. He assumes that countries like China will quietly devalue after being hit with tariffs, thus keeping prices stable. He assumes the Federal Reserve might cooperate to some extent, that the capital markets will pretend nothing happened. Even allies, he believes, will quietly fall in line and accept this new dollar-based rulebook. But in reality, the market won't give you the time to proceed step by step. It reacts in explosive chain reactions that tear through everything. Worse, this is a Pandora's box. Once opened, it cannot be shut. Former U.S. Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson is known for writing highly readable books, full of vivid, scene-based descriptions with a flair for narrative nonfiction. Lively characters, gripping pacing, and lasting resonance. In the film Too Big to Fail, there's a classic line where a Chinese leader says to Paulson, "Your country carries heavy debt. This is your fatal weakness." The honeymoon phase of U.S.-China relations was once heartfelt. Time truly changes everything. By 2025, $36 trillion in national debt is like a rope tightening around America's neck. The U.S. economy may appear to be booming on the surface, but in reality, it's not far from collapse. To say Trump is called upon in times of crisis is no exaggeration. Entrusted by voters with a monumental task, he surely senses the gravity of the mission. Navigating both a minefield of existing debt and the abyss of partisan warfare. It's likely due to this urgency that Trump opted for unconventional moves. On one hand, massive layoffs via the newly established Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. On the other, sweeping tariffs launched on Liberation Day. Trump's logic isn't hard to follow. Cut domestic spending and seize foreign money. But reform is never easy. Musk's own hands-on battles with entrenched interests stirred rage, and even he grew disillusioned. Thus, Trump's second strike aimed to be a decisive one. In hindsight, the April 2nd tariff nuke was undoubtedly rushed. Even the plan's architect, Miran, included caveats that tariffs must be coordinated with a full suite of exchange rate, capital flow, and fiscal policies to achieve their goals. Unfortunately, in practice, such ideal coordination didn't exist. Amid market turmoil, the Federal Reserve failed to step in as Trump had hoped, withholding liquidity that could have stabilized the situation. If the tariffs truly took effect and sparked runaway inflation, political opponents would rapidly weaponize it. China's swift retaliation undermined Trump's pressure tactics. He began to issue timid, indirect signals hoping to reopen talks. But the strategic balance had already fundamentally shifted. China had spent 7 to 8 years preparing for this moment, and its much-criticized strategic patience now became a source of strength. If the EU, Japan, South Korea, and other bystander economies were to ultimately switch sides, it would become an unbearable blow to the U.S. economy. More importantly, Trump's tariff strategy has essentially torn the multilateral coordination path under the WTO framework in an almost irreversible way. While Miran advocates strategic deconstruction of globalization, his vision still includes a U.S.-centric new order, not a descent into lawless, zero-sum games. But the real nuke within a nuke wasn't the tariff storm. In Miran's proposed Mar-a-Lago agreement, one clause stood out for its destructiveness, requiring allied nations to convert their U.S. Treasury holdings into 100-year zero-coupon bonds. This is essentially a structured default. No interest payments, and the principal locked for a century. No liquidity, no return. Extorting allies to extend the life of a debt crisis is a self-inflicted dismantling of national credit. It means the U.S. no longer intends to honor its promises, seeking instead to replace credibility with force, negotiation with coercion. This gravely damages America's image as the beacon of the free world. A global order built on rules and trust, suddenly descending into mob-style asset grabs and unilateral contract rewriting, signals a collapse of the system's foundations. Viewed pessimistically, the dollar-based financial system is fundamentally a Ponzi structure. Confidence comes first, credit follows. Once confidence collapses, the revaluation dominoes fall. Treasuries cease to be safe havens and become risk anchors. The dollar is no longer a global currency, but a ticking time bomb for capital worldwide. Ray Dalio, perhaps the world's greatest expert on superpower cycles, described it this way. What we're witnessing is a textbook breakdown of the world's dominant monetary, political, and geopolitical order. It happens only once in a lifetime, though it has occurred repeatedly throughout history under unsustainable conditions. Perhaps Trump believes everything is still under control. His go-to strategy is extreme pressure. Bluff to the last second, then negotiate for the best deal. He believes that with enough guts and bluster, the markets will always yield, allies will cave, China will compromise, and America will win again. But this time, Trump has truly ventured into the unknown. He thought he was forging a new American-led world order. In reality, he may have simply torn away the last fig leaf covering the old one. When you wave a nearly maxed-out credit card to intimidate the world, the outcome is rarely submission. Instead, all the bills come due at once. As the book On the Brink, Inside the Race to Stop the Collapse of the Global Financial System, says, when a financial institution dies, it dies very quickly. The same goes for nations. In the TV drama Yongjing Dynasty, after a series of financial and exam scandals, the emperor's confidant bluntly points out that the real problem lies in enabling the ruler's worst instincts. Officials weren't blind to the issues. They simply chose to act in a political theater, masking systemic illness with flattery, turning reform into performance, and loyalty into opportunism. The emperor sought solutions but was dragged into disaster by those who claimed to understand him best. Trump seems to have fallen into the same river, while the MAGA inner circle plays out a ritual drama of loyalty and national rejuvenation. No one dares to address the true bottlenecks of American society and economy. Instead, they pledge allegiance on social media and declare endless victory. No one is truly trying to help this nearly 80-year-old man actually make America great again. And so, Trump took a step from which there may be no return. Miran, a Harvard graduate, is not some reckless opportunist. In his earlier paper A Path to Reindustrialization, he demonstrated systematic, restrained thinking. His proposed solutions were not radical, rooted even in classical liberalism. He advocated supply-side reforms to dismantle America's cost trap in manufacturing, and rebuilding industrial capacity through defense-driven demand. Why was this coherent plan shelved in favor of the chaotic Mar-a-Lago agreement? Because they were all in a hurry. In a rush to produce a plan that could scare adversaries, fool markets, and rally voters. In a rush to report back to party hawks, conservatives, old white men, and deep red states. In a rush to shout to the world, trust me just this once. I'll bring America back. Why the rush? Because he's facing a fractured nation, riven by class divides, drowning in debt, and stripped of common ground. All institutional buffers have been depleted. The country has neither patience nor room left. Trump, who clawed his way from the political abyss, knows full well. This isn't a policy cycle to cautiously navigate. This is an all-or-nothing endgame. If he doesn't win this time, he loses not just power, but will face sweeping political, legal, even historical retribution. He must be fast. He must be ruthless. He must bet everything on one plan that can shock the world. Something that convinces people America is still on the road to revival, not teetering at the edge of collapse. When an empire must perform greatness to prove it's not in decline, collapse is never far away. That's it for today's content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
If you feel there is value in this, please like, subscribe to this channel, and leave your thoughts or suggestions in the comments section. Let's grow together and read more good books.